Horse racing. It's been around for centuries and centuries. It dates all the way back to Rome when they used to race chariots, and it all kind of ties into today. Up until about the 1930s, horse racing was all based on good breeding, good nutrition, and good workouts for the horses. But since around the 1940s up until now, lax rules and regulations have allowed America's horse racing industry to become dangerous and unhealthy for the animals, which is my major claim. By dangerous and unhealthy, I mean they use a lot of drugs, harsh training techniques. They start the horses when they're too young, and it's just a tough life for the horses to live. And once they're retired, they have no sure retirement. So basically, horse tracks everywhere around the United States, they lack standards. It's common for racehorses to sustain debilitating injuries, which is my first claim. They start training at a very young age, usually before they're even 2 years old, so their bones and skeletal system overall are not developed yet, and it's really easy for them to earn tears in their muscles and for their legs to become broken at a young age. They run too hard for too long, meaning they're pushed long distances that they shouldn't be pushed until they're much, much older. And they're just urged by their jockey and their trainers, and yeah, it's really bad. They suffer side effects from drugs. A lot of trainers and vets give the horses drugs so that they can ensure that they're safe when they run, but they do gain side effects from the drugs, such as stomach ulcers. They can get this thing called wheezing, where they have trouble breathing from then on with their life and they can't run anymore. And ill temperament is also a big side effect of drugs, because they learn, oh hey, I hate getting shots. I mean, who doesn't, right? My second claim is that they're subject to improper treatment behind closed doors. And by this I mean, you usually go to the race courses and you see these race horses and they're all pretty, they're tall, they're elegant, they're groomed to perfection. But what you don't see is on the back side of the track, when they go back to their stalls, a lot of racehorses get illegal performance-enhancing drugs. And they claim that they have rules and regulations against these. They usually test the horses right before they race. They'll take blood, they'll take pee samples, and they'll go through it to make sure they don't have any drugs. But what they don't know is that they're often given drugs that aren't illegal, but which can hide illegal drugs, such as phenylbutazone, which is an anti-inflammatory. It helps their muscles from getting inflamed when they run, and that's really good for masking the illegal drugs that they're usually given about a week in advance. Lots and lots of steroids, especially for pain and inflammation. Lots of tracks have very, very lax rules and regulations on the drugs that can be given to horses, and that's mainly in Kentucky, which is where horse racing is the biggest. And a good example of that is in 2008, the Kentucky Derby filly 8 Bells, crossing the finish line, she broke both her front ankles, and was later revealed that a week before the race she was given 10 different shots for different things, such as stomach ulcers, inflammatories, steroids, everything. My third claim is that they have uncertain futures once retired. Racehorses, the Jockey Club, which all racehorses are registered to so that they can keep track of them and know what's going on with them, they have nothing saying how the horses need to be retired. So once a racehorse is done racing, they're basically disposed of. As was said by an author named Tim Reynolds of the Kentucky newspaper, simply sending one horse to pasture, injured or not, is not an option all owners are willing to consider. A lot of the horses end up going to slaughterhouses overseas where they're slaughtered for meat, but later it's found, and this was proven through the organization PETA, that racehorses' meat is actually toxic because of all the illegal drugs they're given. A good example of that is a $1 million racehorse who was inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame. His name was Exceller. He was also a Horse of the Year. After he retired racing, he had many different owners, and finally he was slaughtered at a slaughterhouse in Sweden. And this is a horse who earned millions of dollars for his owners. There's no trainers and owners. They have no requirements to endorse thoroughbred adoption and rehoming. They actually often give them a bad reputation of being crazy once they get off the track, and They're mostly euthanized and have no permanent home. In conclusion, I'm saying that race courses all across America should be pushed to have more laws and regulations. They say that they brought out new rules and they say they have new technology to help find these legal drugs and such, but where's the proof? Like, there's still tons of horses dying every year from illegal drugs, being ran too hard, and just awful conditions that people don't pay attention to. As said by Wayne Pacell, the President and Chief Executive of the Humane Society of the United States, to treat these horses like a cheap, throwaway commodity today is a betrayal of our bond and our historical debt to these creatures. Humans are able to say enough, but who speaks for the thoroughbreds? Thank you.
All right, well, we know what the subject matter is. The claim needs to be fixed up a little bit because as you're presenting it, it actually has multiple parts to it. It sounds like there are 2 or 3 claims in what you identify as your proposition. On the secondary points, you list a whole bunch of issues. There's not really a numerical signpost on that listing. And later on, it's a little bit confusing because at one point you say they lack standards. At another point, the claim seems to be that they sustain injuries. And I think they sound like different points to me, but you're making them in the same spot, so I'm not sure that the structure is as clear as it ought to be. On that first point, basically it's all an assumption about the horses being too young. Now, I'm not saying that you are wrong on this. You are probably right on this, but all I have to go by is you're saying it at this particular point, that they start the horses too early and that there are problems as a consequence of that. I don't have any data on this. I thought it was odd at the end where you were complaining that there's no demonstration that these new policies and procedures and equipment work when you haven't shown us that there is in fact a problem that we need those policies and procedures for anyway. The only evidence that you really give us a source citation on, we got 2 quotes, one from Reynolds and one from the Humane Society of the United States. We got a vague reference to PETA, which I wouldn't necessarily say is a credible source. You've got a couple of examples. I don't know where the examples come from, and so the information doesn't seem like it's as reliable and well cited as it needs to be. You keep saying lots of horses suffer from these problems, but I didn't hear any information that said lots of horses suffer from it. I heard, like I said, the 2 examples that you mentioned, and actually it's just well, I guess it is the 2 examples. The Kentucky Derby horse that broke its ankles, and Exceller, the horse of the year, who got turned into dog food or some kind of meat. By the way, the whole argument about meat and that they get sold for slaughter or all those kinds of things on that third point, that's really a value argument, and I think that it doesn't work for this particular assignment. The better factual claims are that the horse racing industry itself is harmful to the horses, like I said, I think you have a good idea here that they start too early in the process, they aren't screened properly, they start drugging them up and all those kinds of problems. I think that's a good argument. I just didn't hear any evidence to support that it's true. I want to give you credibility on this, but it's hard to do without more data other than, like I said, the 1 example that you had. So I thought that was a little bit problematic. And then the second argument that really comes down to that there isn't really any enforcement on this, and the only argument that you have here is, well, they haven't proven that it's worked. And I'm not sure that that's really sufficient to convince us that the rules that are in place, the organizations, the institutions that are supposed to be watching all this, aren't making any effort to correct these sorts of problems. The presupposition I think most people make is that people who own horse races are investing a lot of money in this, and that these in fact are investments that they want to protect, not something that they want to toss away lightly. So I think there's a huge burden of proof that you have to overcome on this, and I'm just not sure that there's enough evidence on that. I thought you did a really nice job, though, speaking to the audience. You're relaxed in your voice, and you engage us while you're talking about those things. I think that you've got a passion on the issue that comes out a lot with some of the examples that you're talking about. But like I said, I think some of those arguments get a little into the value claims that are coming up on the third point. All right, thank you.